but he casts a really different background from them on climate change, especially. As mayor of Miami, he's really made this an important priority of his. He has announced actually efforts to, he's been praised by the UN for his efforts to help protect Miami from flooding, from sea level rise, and from effects of hurricanes and other climate change fueled events which are growing. This puts him in sharp contrast with Trump, who has reportedly decried climate change as a hoax.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by energy and environment reporter Breanne Deppisch. Breanne, there's a new entrant into the 2024 Republican presidential sweepstakes. You've described him as potentially the most hawkish Republican candidate on climate. Who are we talking about, and why is that the case?
This is Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, and he has served as, he's a two-term mayor of Miami. He comes from a long line of politics. His father previously served in the role. He is a fresh-faced, comparatively, he's 45, fresh-faced contender who actually is really competing with some well-known names from the Sunshine State. That is obviously Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and obviously former President Donald Trump. But he casts a really different background from them on climate change, especially. As mayor of Miami, he's really made this an important priority of his. He has announced actually efforts to, he's been praised by the UN for his efforts to help protect Miami from flooding, from sea level rise, and from effects of hurricanes and other climate change fueled events which are growing. This puts him in sharp contrast with Trump, who has reportedly decried climate change as a hoax, taken the US out of the Paris Climate Accord, and also from DeSantis, who's done some notable things on conservation, but not really. He's refused to say the word climate change. Right. He's kind of seen it as a politically charged word.
And congressional Republicans have obviously been fighting with the Biden administration over a number of these issues as well.
Exactly. So I think at least on the issues of climate, he's much more progressive than I think some in the field. Whether this will help him or hurt him remains to be seen. And I think he's expected to outline some of these priorities in a little bit more detail going forward.
So there's been a lot of talk of the Russian oil price cap. I mean, obviously the war in Ukraine is going on. There's a desire to keep the Russians from maximizing their income from energy needs in Europe and elsewhere. Talk a little bit about what the economic case for this is.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, there's two goals in the Russian price cap, right? The first is to reduce Russia's oil revenue, which it uses to fund its weapons, and really just continue its war in Ukraine at the scale and scope that it has been. The second, of course, is to ensure that Russian oil stays on the market. We don't want anything like even close to the energy prices that we saw last year. And there was actually a paper published recently by the National Bureau of Economic Researchers. This is really well-respected group of economists from MIT, from other institutions, and they basically they modeled this sort of new dynamic formula to measure the efficacy of the price cap. And they actually found that the supply curve with Russia is inelastic or even downward sloping, basically, which means you could actually lower the price cap further and Russia would keep production level or maybe increase it slightly because they have the incentive to just, it's really their main source of revenue. They really need that oil revenue. It's sort of a hand-to-mouth model, as economists would say. And beyond that, they actually suggest that it's in the U.S. and G7 countries' best interest to lower the price cap further to around $45 to stop Russia from amassing sort of a shadow fleet or illegal tankers in which it can ship its oil outside the price cap.
So closer to home, Representative Chris Smith, a New Jersey Republican, he's been trying to save the whales. Has he had a little bit of a win?
He has had a big win. So yes, he actually introduced this as part of the H.R. 1 marquee Republican energy package passed earlier this year. This was sort of an interesting bipartisan amendment. It really received some support from Democrats as well. Chris Smith he represents the state of New Jersey. He's the longest serving New Jersey representative. And there have been rising concerns about these whale deaths, along the New Jersey, New York, upper upper northeast coast, just in concerns that they're linked to a sort of sighting and sonar activities from the offshore wind farms. Basically, this bill is pretty bipartisan. It basically authorizes a GAO to conduct an investigation into the offshore wind and whether it has an impact on the whales.
So does this split environmental groups a little bit? Because obviously there's a lot of advocacy for wind energy, but also a lot of desire to protect species.
You know, it has, and it's been interesting. I think it's honestly divided some Democrats in the Biden administration, for instance, versus environmental groups in a sort of interesting way. Like Save the Whales, which is primarily associated with the far left,
Sure.
very progressive movements. They are actually have really been hailing these Republican-led efforts in New Jersey to sort of conduct more investigations and at least pause the offshore wind activity until they can determine that it's not causing the whale deaths. It's really unclear definitively if the two are linked, but they're saying, all right, well, let's not continue to rush forward at this speed until we know what's going on.
Well, this has been a whale of a good time, Breanne. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can read Breanne and subscribe to our Daily on Energy newsletter at washingtonexaminer.com.